Communication is much more than the words that we speak or hear. Studies have quoted figures from 50% to 90% that communication, the message and emotion we get from others, is based on nonverbal or unspoken signals. Starting from Mehrabian and Ferris in Inference of Attitudes from Nonverbal Communications in Two Channels in 1967. Add that to additional communication based on subtext, context, implication, and inference, and you'll almost wonder what impact our actual words have. Whatever the case, what we think we are communicating is often overshadowed or outright contradicted by what is meant to be interpreted between the lines. What we say is not really what we mean most of the time, and this is something we begin to learn as children. It's not that the words we use don't matter, they do, but the way in which we use them and the contexts we use them in are far more indicative of our feelings and emotions. Unfortunately, for many of us, these small signs might as well be incantations for magic spells based on how subtle or convoluted they seem. One of the keys to communicating more clearly and being able to read between the lines of what people say is to understand subtext. To borrow from Cheney and Liddon's 1997 publication, Subtextual Communication, Impression Management, and Empirical Study, in the context of an office environment, subtext is the following. Subtextual communication, a covert language that strengthens or negates the spoken text, is used to influence the impressions other people have of us and may be used to competitive advantage in numerous situations in the workplace. The subtext is more subtle than the obvious text and may be more honest in interactions between people. Fast, 1991. Subtextual communication elements are related to image and may convey positive or negative impressions related to assurance, credibility, competence, and savoir-faire through dress, manner of introducing people, body language, regard for time, use of electronic communication, and dining etiquette. Paul got a part-time job to give him extra cash as he got his university degree. He decided to work in a local electronics store because he knew the people, the area, and the product like the back of his hand. Imagine his surprise when he discovered he wasn't the big sales star he made himself out to be during the interview process. Everyone else seemed to hit their sales quotas with ease, yet there he was, stuck, barely reaching the lower end of the target. What made matters worse was the fact that other staff members had absolutely no technical knowledge, yet they surpassed Paul in sales every single month. Paul's sales were so bad that his boss called him in for a performance meeting to address the problem. Instead of pointing out where Paul went wrong, he decided to match him up with his top salesman to discover how the sales techniques differed. For the entire afternoon, Paul tagged along with the top-performing salesperson, Sam. As Paul observed, he noticed something interesting. The customers were all completely the same. The queries were all the same, and his solutions were the same, except for one small thing. Where Paul would give up or move on, Sam offered additional recommendations and moved in for the kill. He realized this when a customer was looking at a camera. The customer raised his hands and declared the product to be fine. At this point, Sam picked up a more expensive camera and walked them through its features. Paul wouldn't usually do that. When the customer said something was fine, he would continue focusing on closing the sale on the same camera. But to his surprise, the customer ended up buying the more expensive camera. As soon as the customer left the store, Paul asked Sam, "What made you suggest a whole new product? Isn't that just confusing the customer? I thought he said it was fine." Sam just laughed and said, "Just because the customer says it's fine doesn't mean it is. Fine is not positive. It usually means they want something more or their expectations haven't been met. It's them asking for more options in reality." Paul was taking people's words literally and only at face value, and because of that, he was missing the real messages people were sending him. Whatever was being said was the only thing Paul was operating on, and he didn't consider that communication would occur in any other way. Sam explained that people's words were merely the tip of the iceberg in terms of what they wanted to communicate, and fine said with a flat speaking tone, was as good as, "This sucks." That one simple statement made a huge change in Paul's sales as he began trying to dig beneath the words themselves and pick up on the meaning behind them. Subtext will help you achieve your goals, both personally and professionally, as you begin to truly respond to what people are trying to communicate. Don't be like Paul. Communication can be divided into two categories, overt and covert. Overt is the words we say and the explicit messages we want to convey. This is when we directly tell someone that we're hungry and ask for a hamburger. Subtext is the covert type of communication. It's almost never directly said, relies on literally anything besides the direct message coming out of someone's mouth, and requires correct interpretation. Using subtext to say, "I'm hungry," would include rubbing your stomach, licking your lips, pointing out that there's a new menu on a nearby table, and mentioning that your previous meal was tiny. Not everyone's going to pick up on those signs, but it is undeniable what the person wanted to convey. We routinely communicate through these indirect means and hope that it saves us the trouble of being direct. Subsequently, understanding the subtext under and surrounding people's seemingly benign statements gives you insight into their true feelings and thoughts. For example, how does the overt dialogue below differ from the subtextual covert message? Here, it's what is not said that completes the message. The subtext is that the question wasn't replied to in a convincing manner and thus is less than sincere. Suppose the answerer of the question has a history of being blunt. Am I fat? No, you're not fat. Translation: Yeah, you might be a little bit fat. Am I fat? No, but I suppose you could maybe lose a couple of pounds. Translation: Yeah, you're definitely fat now. Subtext can be delivered through vocal tone, phrasing, delivery, reference to prior experiences, knowledge of relationships, body language, gesticulation, circumstances, and even moods. It sounds abstract and confusing, but just imagine that subtext is everything we want to say besides the exact words we use. In fact, that's one of the big reasons we use it. It allows us to navigate the world through indirect and non-confrontational means. If you're great at subtext, it saves time, it's efficient, and it imparts great emotional intelligence by understanding people's ever-shifting circumstances. Subtext appears in every situation, from work and dating to social situations and family dynamics. In fact, much of dating can be said to be subtext because much of sexual tension depends on not revealing true intentions up front. If you ask someone to dinner and they tell you they're busy, they might be busy or they might not be interested. If you ask the same person out 4 times and each time they say they're busy, then there is additional subtext for you to read. Take the context into account and things aren't looking good for you on the romantic front. Through our behavior and choice of words, we transmit clues and desperately hope people pick up on them. Of course, this is the origin of passive-aggressive behavior. We don't feel comfortable saying something directly, so our indirect measures become more and more aggressive and unpleasant. As a species, we're fairly avoidant and non-confrontational. Not many people feel comfortable wearing their opinions and hearts on their sleeves, especially when they clash with those of other people. Directness is inherently tense, so it's something we prefer to avoid. A helpful method to imagine how subtext works in social situations is to imagine how it factors into a novel or a screenplay. When you're watching a movie or reading a book, you don't usually get told what the characters understand, feel, or think, and despite that, you come away with a clear sense of meaning about the scenes and relationships. This is all because of subtext. In this context, it's commonly referred to as what is under the skin of the character, what drives and motivates them, what they feel toward everyone else in the story, and what's under the surface of all their actions. Without giving characters clear motivations and having everyone in the movie operate only on a what you see is what you get level, you end up with a flat movie with no emotional impact. Even in the movies, There can be ambiguity in the subtext, sometimes intentional and sometimes not. This is the part the audience must fill in, which is why two people can come out of a film and have radically different ideas about the meaning the director was trying to convey. Let's take a look at an example scene in detail to illustrate this clearly. Always remember that we have to separate the covert and overt communication. Imagine a room where a man clasps a tiny baby blue box in his hands. The table is decorated with roses and champagne. A woman appears at the side of the frame and prepares to leave the room. She does not notice the man in the corner. He says, "Wait." Why does the man call the woman? If you say, "Because he wants to propose to her," you've understood the subtext present in this basic scene. The dialogue never says that the man wants to propose marriage to the woman. You inferred that from a combination of the mood, description, and the scene itself. This has been The Science of Likability: 60 evidence-based methods to radiate charisma, make a powerful impression, win friends, and trigger attraction. Written by Patrick King, narrated by Russell Newton. Copyright 2019 by Patrick King. Production copyright by Patrick King.
Hello listeners, this is Russell with Newton Media Group, and on behalf of myself and Patrick King, we'd like to thank you for the time you've given to the podcast and hope that you've found it useful in your daily life. We value your time, which is why our episodes begin immediately with the content, but we also highly value your opinion and would greatly appreciate if you would leave us a rating and a review in your podcast provider. Also, don't forget, if you'd like a copy of the free mini book on conversation tactics, take a moment and visit patrickkingconsulting.com to request your free copy.